I'd like to call this meeting of Finance Committee to order. As is customary, I'd like to welcome all members and invite our Honorable Premier to open us in prayer.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for all your many blessings, including us being able to gather here today to do the business of the people. We ask, dear Lord, that you give us prudence, collaboration, and wisdom to act in the overall interests of the people of the Cayman Islands. And I ask colleagues to join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. But thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Please be seated. I would like to thank all members of the committee for being in attendance for this, the first Finance Committee of the 2025 to 2029 term. As you see, we have a quorum. I want to announce the purpose of the meeting of Finance Committee is to consider expenditure items shown in the hard copy material that has been distributed to all honorable members and all members should have in their possession. The committee's approval for these supplementary expenditures is being sought. Honorable members will also know that a meeting of Finance Committee can be called in the absence of Parliament itself being in a meeting, as this is permitted under paragraph 82, suborder 5 of our parliamentary standing orders. I request members' usual cooperation in asking questions promptly and succinctly. All members, in addition to the matters that we're going to consider, I would like to address a number of matters before the committee starts, and that's in regards to the forecast deficit that is projected for the 2025 financial year. As we all know, it has been customary.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman, before you get too deep into that. Mr. Chairman, I need to offer apologies on behalf of the Honorable Juliana O'Connor-Conley, who is traveling. It's unfortunate that we were only given 22 hours notice for this meeting, but she does send her apologies. If she could have been here, she would have been here, so I need to offer apologies on her behalf.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Thank you very much. As we know,
Mr. Chairman, as
yes,
per the
member.
Standing Orders 82.5, which you as Minister of Finance have the authority on the Finance Committee to call sitting of Finance Committee at the earliest possible date or at any other date proposed. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, unless there is a reasonable explanation for a 22-hour notice for this very important committee to meet, I'll be proposing a motion to offer a different date on Monday where all members of this Honorable House can participate.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, as we go through the agenda and the items under consideration, I think it will be clear why we need to meet and why it's urgent. I think anytime there are important items requiring public monies to be spent and those items being consumed by the respective ministries and unable to continue to make payments, that I believe is very urgent. And I think all of us would agree that we need to get on with the business of the committee. We are here, and given the fact that I think it's 18 of the 19 members of the parliament that are present, I think that's more than enough and adequate representation of the people. Honorable members, I have listened very carefully to all that has been said over the last few weeks, and I want to ensure that the members of this committee and the listening public that our budget process is sound, our budget system is sound, and there are a number of things that all of us have known, anyone who's elected will have known for many, many years, and that is the trends around how the Cayman Islands budget performs. And that is that the first 3 months of the year is always when the government earns the vast majority of its revenue. Therefore, in the first 3 months, if you look at those months in isolation, you will see that those months will always provide a significant surplus of revenue over expenditure. However, in the last 9 months of the year, historically, all of those months will produce, when looked in isolation, a deficit. And so the first quarter of the year always funds the activities for the entire fiscal year. And that is because financial services fees are due before the 31st of March. I would ask the Financial Secretary if you'd kindly ask the Sergeant to distribute the last 4 years, month on month, revenue versus expenditure collections. And members will see that April through December of every single year, there is a deficit. And in fact,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, member?
It would be grateful if, just to go along with your narrative, if you allow us the time to get the document. So as you speak,
I will continue, member, because any member of this House that actually doesn't notice has not been paying attention. In particular, if you're a member of Cabinet, where you get quarterly financial reports, and this attachment is in every single one of those quarterly attachments. I'm glad to see the lady member from Georgetown West and the other new members of the House who might not be aware of this have it in their possession. And so I continue. All of those 9 months always produce a deficit position. In fact, in these 4 years, the only time that didn't happen was July 2021. And that was purely because there was a one-off $29.6 million collected from proceeds from liquidated entities, which we know comes from the banks. And that only happens every so often under the law that governs the distribution of those funds back to CIG. In 2024, honorable members received the core government's cumulative monthly operating surplus reporting for the first 3 months, total for $251.8 million, and the cumulative monthly operating deficits reporting for the remaining 9 months, total $191.7 million, leaving a significantly smaller surplus for the entire year of $60.1 million by the end of 2024. Honorable members, 2025 is no different than the trend in behaving the same way. The cumulative monthly operating surplus for the first 3 months totaled $262.1 million, and already the month of April, there was reported a deficit of $22.1 million, which is double the deficit of the same month in the last year out of interest. While the operating surplus of $262.1 million at the end of March 2025 is commendable, it is important to recognize that this amount will be depleted over the remainder of the year due to the monthly deficits between April and December. Members will also note that the honorable members will also, what was also not mentioned in the recent dialogue around this issue is what is contributing to the possible deficit for 2025 unless corrective action is taken. What the previous cabinet approved in supplementary expenditure and funding totaled $58 million in the first 4 months of 2025, 38.3 million in operating expenditure, and 19.7 in capital. These supplementary expenditures, in particular the operating expenditure of 38.3 million, will contribute to the reduction of the reported $262.1 million operating surplus that was reported at the end of March 2025. The supplementary expenditure would also contribute to the $26.2 million deficit that was projected in the 2025 pre-election economic financial update, or preview, a deficit that could rise unless corrective action is taken by the government. To ensure the government maintains its financial stability and return to prudent fiscal responsibility, the government has begun taking corrective actions with the aim of curtailing expenditure during the remainder of the 2025 financial year and assessing planned legislation that was expected to generate additional revenue. Honorable members, we have a number of items before us. The first is TP 41, financial assistance. The schedule before us today is the request for supplementary funding of $14.4 million to transfer payment 41 financial assistance. Due to the rising cost of living, Caymanians are finding it increasingly difficult to afford basic household expenses and to cope with the challenging economic hardships. The government has been providing financial assistance to eligible Caymanians. Financial assistance is provided for a variety of expenses, including food, accommodation, utilities, burial assistance, medical expenses, which are not covered by health insurance, clothing, transportation, internet, phone, and the support for children, such as preschool assistance, camps, after-school care, school uniforms, shoes, and other supplies. Long-term financial assistance is also provided to older persons and adults with permanent disabilities. As of April 2025, there were 1,724 households that received financial assistance. Of those, 1,095 persons received long-term financial assistance, which is paid from TP 41, Financial Assistance Appropriation. The Ministry of Social Development and Innovation has confirmed that the 2025 appropriation for TP 41 financial assistance is fully exhausted and that no more financial assistance payments can be made at this time when this supplementary request is approved. The depletion of the appropriation over the 2024 and 2025 budget period can be attributed to a number of reasons. Firstly, in February 2024, the amount of financial assistance for accommodation, food, and utilities was increased, and assistance for rental deposits, internet, and transportation was introduced. In July 2024, an additional $400 was given to recipients of long-term financial assistance and those who receive financial assistance for food in order to prepare for the hurricane season and the arrival of Hurricane Beryl. In July 2024, bus wardens and bus drivers who are employed by outsourced bus companies received a one-time summer stipend of $2,700 per recipient. And in December 2024, an additional holiday stipend of $500 was given to all recipients that received long-term financial assistance. The additional $14.4 million is being requested today and is the amount that is needed to meet the projected expenditure to the end of this year. Honorable members, not approving the $14.4 million in supplementary funding means that over 1,700 households will not receive financial assistance starting the end of the month. Honorable members will note that there are two other items on the schedule before us today. And these are the request for supplementary funding of $8,250,000 for HEA2 medical care for indigents and $20,537,000 for NGS 55 tertiary care for various local and overseas institutions. Supplementary funding is being sought to ensure that there is adequate funding to continue coverage of recipients under these programs and to prevent any disruption in the provision of these vital primary and secondary healthcare services. The monthly average number of covered indigent members has been increasing, with the number of indigents currently totaling 2,300 persons at the end of March 2025. Honorable members, the 2025 budgets for the appropriations continue to be inadequate, not only due to the growing medical needs of persons, but also due to the increasing number of recipients and the escalating costs of tertiary care. The original 2025 budget for NGS 55 totaled $14.426 million. This amount was exhausted by the end of April 2025. The projected expenditure for NGS 55 for 2025 is approximately $55.5 million. At this time, only $20.527 million is being requested as supplementary funding, but government intends to return later in the year for the balance of the funding that is going to be needed for the remainder of this financial year. Under HEA2, indigent patients are provided with primary and secondary health care services, as well as dental and mental health care services. The original 2025 budget for HEA2 totaled $12 million, with a further $4.5 being funded from the segregated insurance fund to supplement the cost. This amount is going to be exhausted by the end of July 2025. The projected expenditure for HEA2 for 2025 is approximately $28.5 million. At this time, the $8.25 million is being requested as supplementary funding, but the government again intends to return later this year for the balance of funding for the total needed for the remainder of the year. Honorable members, the costs of NGS 55 are normally paid by the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company, or Cineco, upfront on behalf of the government and then reimbursed by the Minister of Health through the NGS 55 appropriation. Similarly, the costs of HEA2 are normally covered by the Health Services Authority, or HSA, and then reimbursed by the Minister of Health through the HEA2 appropriation. Any delays in the reimbursement of costs to Cineco and HSA will have an adverse impact on their ability to pay the local and overseas healthcare institutions, including payments from Cineco to HSA, since both entities have expressed cash flow concerns. Also, indigents, seafarers, and veterans may not be able to receive critical care as and when are needed. Honorable members, not approving NGS 55 and HEA2 supplementary funding requests will delay or deny necessary medical care for the indigents, presenting a significant liability to the government. Honorable members, let us look at the first item on the Finance Committee's agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Schedule. Yes, member.
Before we proceed into the first item on the agenda, I recognize that you've tried to offer up some clarity as to the preview, which is much appreciated as this country is in dire need of clarity. But we all are fully aware that the projections in the preview is not done by the elected arm, and we're not allowed to be involved. So as to the projections, I think it would be only suited necessary as to the explanation of the budget or deficit to be done by the parties upon which who created it. I'm struggling to understand the viewpoint that the government or the elected arm is not involved in the creation of the document and its projections and therefore its deficits. But now the new government, and rightfully so the Minister of Finance and Chairman today, is explaining the outcome of it. I have no opportunity to ask the questions relevant to those projections because up to this day we cannot find out why there was what is perceived that there's no audience for the entities who created this document to be questioned as to an extra surplus than what is projected within the 2025 first quarter. So I am at loss as how to proceed and when would be the opportunity to address or question this anomaly and whether or not those projections were considered within the preview because we recognize it had a major impact on the voters and their viewpoints. And especially because you opened the door, speaking to the preview in your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, I wonder whether this committee will have the opportunity to have supplementary questions as to the positions or we just will move forward. And if not today, when will we have an opportunity to question that?
Honorable Member, I heard what you said very carefully. When you said, we all know, I don't know that it had an impact on any voters. So I don't join voices with you in that particular opinion. However, what we all do know is that this has been a part of our parliamentary process now for quite a long time, a preview. And so the preview is prepared just as all projections get prepared. The finance team goes out to ministries and portfolios and they feed back into the Ministry of Finance what their projections are for the year. The key thing to know and to note is that every time you introduce new expenditure, so for example, increasing financial assistance by $250 a month, when that is not included in the original budget, but is taken on the heels of an election, then we know that that has to have a negative impact on the budget because after March, those payments will continue. The 250 times every person on for permanent financial assistance, all 9,025, are going to continue to get that funding. All seamen and veteran are going to continue to get that funding. And so it is, for me, quite simple. If members of the previous cabinet knew that they already had exhausted $38.3 million in supplementary funding, that would be a strong indicator that what was budgeted was going to be subsumed or overtaken by actual expenditure, because you wouldn't have supplementary expenditure if everything was going on course and being normal. So knowing that there was already $38.3 million that had been asked in supplementaries in that first 4 months, of which every member who was a member of the previous cabinet would know, and knowing you'd taken policy decisions to increase expenditure, one would know at a minimum that that would have had a negative effect on whatever the original projections would be. And so members will have every opportunity during the budget process, when we look at the entire new budget, which will include the previous year's financial statements, to make whatever statements or commentaries that they want to make around that subject and pose those questions at that time. And I think that would be a good time, because by then we will have gotten through even more months of 2025. But needless to say, I take the job very seriously, and we are working diligently to ensure that we are in compliance, because I know all of us share one common view in this honorable committee, and that is that the Cayman Islands cannot go into treacherous territory of being non-compliant with any element of the FFR, because we know the negative impact that would have.
I agree, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you so much for that thorough response. I think it's important to recognize that 2 members of that cabinet of a minority government of 5 is now part of the current government, and you have to have all 5 members in support. So I think it's important to note for the record, but I recognize that I didn't get the answer that I was hoping for, to see who would answer to that. You answered on behalf of the finance team, which is independent for the preview, but I'll try to address it another time and allow you to proceed, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman. Can we confirm that we are recording for YouTube for the listening audience?
Remember, I'm a nuts and bolts type of guy. I hope we're recording for all audiences. However, at the end of the day, the business of the committee needs to continue, and whether I have the audience of YouTube or Bluetooth, I'm continuing. TP 41, financial assistance for the amount of 14.4 million. Are there any questions on this item?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A pleasant good morning to all members of this Parliament, as well as those who are visiting and the amazing civil servants. It's good to see your guys' faces, so welcome. Through you to the current minister, can the minister say whether or not there was any acknowledgement of the budgeted amount for 2024 was expressed to be inadequate? 2024 and 2025. And because we were talking about 2025 today, was there any expressed viewpoints in the last sitting, and you can ask the chief officer, whether the amount that was allocated was under budgeted?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, just give me a minute, sir. Mr. Chair.
Honorable Minister.
To answer the member's question, while the ministry would have submitted a budget, the final allocation of that budget would have been subject to cabinet decision, sir.
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I accept the minister's answer, and I'm assuming he's suggesting that yes, it was then under budgeted. I see him nodding his head, so that's an answer. Mr. Chairman, can the honorable minister say who was the current minister at the time when this budget for this ministry, when the budget approved, the amounts for 2024 and 2025 was approved? Who was the honorable minister at that time?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, the minister in that year, for the 2024-25 budget, when it was being prepared, was the minister at the time, Andre Ebanks, no Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the minister say then why the actuals for 2023, which was the year before this two-year budget was, set out for 24 million? And let me just get my numbers correct to make sure that I have the exact figure. Mr. Roy, was it 2024? What did 2024 actuals was again? Was 26 million for 2023. Can the Honorable Minister say why then did the ministry budget a whopping $10 million less than the previous year, and then later on a whopping, looks like $14 million less than what the actuals were in the year before?
Before you answer, Honorable Minister, I have with me the unaudited actuals for 2023, and it's, from my numbers, 21.37 million.
Correct, Minister. Mr. Chairman, I do apologize. You are right with your figures, but it was still a substantially $6 million less than the actuals before. So I'm just trying to let the Parliament and those who are listening audience that there was a substantial drop in the projections, meaning under budgeting from the year previous, and if they can give logical reasons as to why.
Mr. Chair, as this is a historical,
Honorable Premier.
through you, as this is historical, the current minister is not adequately equipped to answer the question, but I can, if you may.
Honorable Premier, as you were constitutionally responsible for the ministry at that time, I find it appropriate for you to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, as the member would know, as part of the cabinet and caucus that prepared the last budget, the department and the ministry projected that this would cost $25 million each year. But for the purposes of trying to facilitate a balanced budget to the Parliament, we were advised to take a significant cut. And one of the persons who advocated the reason why it should be acceptable is the current member. If I recall, say, when you come to Parliament for supplementary funding for this TP, you'll always get it. So you can take the cut in order to facilitate other non-essential items, because you can come back to Parliament to ask for this because it's politically palpable.
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know though he's trying to associate the decision to me, that's all well and good. I think that the important part is that it will not happen again in the upcoming new budget, that the appropriate amount will be allocated fully and not half, regardless of whose direction it was, even though the good member is fully aware it wasn't me.
I never, through you, Mr. Chair, associated only to him, but he was one of those who commented on that view. And yes, that's why we are here, and this is why you called Finance Committee rather than to do this by way of Election 11-5, is to be transparent with the public, with the needs of the country. And I hope the honorable member will remember that comment when we come to pass the budget, that we need to get to root causes and give true budgeting, which will be a theme as you go on to the next appropriation.
Absolutely. And Premier and members, whilst I have not been in this territory for over a decade, I do recall TP 41 and NGS 55 and HEA 2. I see the member for Bordentown East nodding his head, because he too would have been here when I was here. Yes, we are a little bit of relics from the past, but this has been an issue for a long time, members. So if we could move the line of questioning along, and if we could accept that same line of questioning, we wouldn't then repeat for the next two, because it'll be the same answer, let's face it, and members. So in order to be efficient and make good use of our time, and I know I'm very cognizant that we are on the clock down here, and when I look at the number of civil servants, I do want to make good use of the committee's time and their time, because I'm cognizant that per hour, this is quite a costly exercise for my current budget. So I would then call on the member from Bordentown East West, who has, Honorable Deputy Leader of Opposition, I thought you had completed since you had pounded this point so long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I would definitely advise you that I wasn't. Thank you, and I do agree that the point has been taken, and the government has said that they will be budgeting appropriately as to what is being suggested by the good civil servants and ministry. I just want to change the subject matter now. Can the Honorable Minister say whether there's been any policy change in respect to what this appropriation is for, which is rental assistance? And I'll give the good member context. The Honorable Minister of Finance suggested that there were some inappropriate leasings of leases within the department from family members to family members, which was created in legislation by the now Premier when he was the minister, which is legal, but suggested by the Honorable Minister of Finance in a report at Cayman Compass that it was highly inappropriate. Is there any intention to cut leases of persons who are leasing to other family members?
Honorable member, since the question, I think, whilst has been directed to the minister, you did mention a comment that I made. And let me address that. I have asked the director and her staff if they would take a quick look, because whilst I know it's created in legislation, I had gotten personal reports of people who were creating leases that perhaps were not as legal as any of us as members of the committee and overseers of the public purse would. And so once that's done, I will ensure that you're the first person that I call to ensure that everything that's happening is along the lines of the policy that was created, which, for example, is if a grandparent owned a piece of property, owned a unit in the past, they couldn't rent to their own loved ones and had to rent to someone else, which I understand the legislation sought to correct. However, as we all know, once you're talking about things happening within a particular household, then things can get a little tricky. And I think all of us would agree that that could happen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to hear from the ministry itself, because I don't think, being the former minister myself, I know they're very adequate and would never allow anything inappropriate to happen. So it's either one, that your information is incorrect, or we were not aware that the legislation allowed such leases, which was created by the now Premier.
Let me be clear. There is no department created under the sun that can magically ensure nothing inappropriate happens. Inappropriate happens when people report something that is not correct and not known to the members, to the persons.
Mr. Chair, while I thought you adequately answered that question earlier, B, as the ministry, do plan to undertake review of all of the services, not just housing and rental assistance, all of the services we offer to our clients to ensure that we are reaching the right people who has the need to receive that service.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Chairman, though the policy is one thing, I'm asking the Minister, is there any intention to change the legislation? Because the lease from family member to family member is created in law, and again I repeat, by the now Premier and former Minister of this. So it's legal to do. So I'm asking, is there any intention through the Minister to change that, which would largely affect a number of persons, and maybe the Minister may know how many people, how many leases within the Department of Financial Assistance are through family members to family members.
We can ensure that the electioneering and the campaigning kind of ends here. I can answer that question. No. No, there's no intention to change the legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are, you can move on to the next member now.
Can I recognize the member from Bordentown West?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Honourable Minister, for this amount, can we say how many people are actually receiving this assistance?
It's 1,724 households and 1,095 persons on permanent financial assistance. Member from Borden West, was there anything in addition to that you wanted to minister?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, my next question, I just wanted to get it from my records. Have we done any studies with regards to, in terms of aging? Because one of the things that we noticed in the census document, we saw where there are the different age groups and so forth. Have we done any studies to see what the future demand for this service would look like? Or is that something you guys will be looking at as you prepare the budget for this year?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that the department is very aware of a lot of those numbers and have done projections previously, but we'll certainly have some updated information we can share, hopefully at the next Finance Committee, and how that would look.
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Honorable Member for Borden Town East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to all. My question for the record is in regards to a comment or something to the effect of one-time payment. You mentioned about bus wardens, so I just wanted to clarify the policy in terms of the payments that they got last year, summer and winter payments, which they normally don't get, that the Honorable Premier was so gracious to complete that policy. Is that being continued?
Honorable Member, all policies that have been undertaken are things that I now have to take a very close look at, and I can give the committed undertaking that we certainly will be looking very closely and keenly at those sorts of payments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, because those bus wardens become, don't want to use the word destitute, but they're in need of those payments at the time. I'm sure you're aware. Mr. Chair, another question was under this same appropriation. Does the Honorable Minister have any plans to place a satellite office in the Borden Town District for financial, for I guess social development, or what they called NAU?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, there's currently no plans to have a satellite office in the Borden area at this time.
Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to note that whilst moving forward, if the Minister and his team can have a relook or a rethink of this policy, that would also benefit not only Borden Town, but the East End and North Side residents. Normally those persons who are in need of this type of service normally does not have any transportation or otherwise. So I would really appreciate it, Mr. Chair, if the Minister would take a second look at it. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I thank the member for his comments, but while there's no office there, we do district days in all of the districts on a very regular basis for that exact reason that he mentioned of people not being able to access the office in town or any other services there.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. And what I would ask then, until they can sort out the actual policy, is if the visit could be more regular.
Honorable Minister, can you give the committee a view on the frequency of the visits and what sort of uptake do you have in terms of people who come out? If you have that information, raise it to hand.
1 second, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the visits out the district is once per month. The uptake is low. Sometimes there's nobody. But in addition to that, the department also do home visits for those people who can't come out.
Thank you very much, member. Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the minister say if the ministry still intends to move forward with the increase of the minimum income or maximum income that you can have in order to get services from the NEU? Before leaving the ministry, it was envisioned to increase the minimum from 3,000 to 4,000 as currently the policy determines that a person who's making more than 3,000 wouldn't be able to get, a household, thank you, of more than 3,000 wouldn't be able to get assistance under, outside of special circumstances, and I think there's a level of discretion there. But the recognition that a lot of families were not getting assistance and denied on the basis that they made more than $3,000, the intention was to increase that to 4,000. Is that still envisioned within the ministry and department?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, the department has, I've been told, has done some preliminary investigations, but they've not really presented the findings as yet. However, all members need to be aware that if that was to raise, there'd still be some budget implications that have to be taken in consideration.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member from Georgetown West.
Can the minister identify the exact amounts for July and August that was paid to the bus wardens, please?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, just 1 second. Mr. Chair, to answer the question, the amount was a stipend, a one-time stipend of $2,700 per bus driver or bus warden, and that total amounted to $441,200.
Are there any further questions?
Mr. Chair, just a footnote.
Honorable Mayor.
Through you, in order for the ministry, should the appropriation, supplementary appropriation be approved today, to try to stay within the limits of what's being approved so it actually lasts for the remainder of 2025, is that they are going to have to start from this month to reassess persons who had received amounts. So there was a directive brought by the member for Georgetown Central when he was the minister to freeze reassessments from December all the way to June for the purposes that was stated at the time, for not have reassessments during and around and near the election period. I'm not here to quibble over the rights or wrongs of that, but it just means that reassessments will have to now recommence to be able to understand whether there are persons who still qualify, and if so, do they qualify to have full amounts or portion amounts, so that the ministry can appropriately have accountability of whether the money in the appropriation will now be spent prudently. Without those reassessments continuing, there'll be no accountability, and you could be back here for more money. But I'm sure that the team will ensure that those reassessments occur now that we're outside of the election period.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, one last follow-up. I know we're moving on to the next line item, but I think earlier in your remarks you said that if the ministry is, if this approval isn't done, that they're going to run out of money by the end of this month. Was I correct in understanding that?
That is correct. We exhausted the appropriation at the end of May.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, so would it have been okay to have had this sitting of Finance Committee on Monday? Would you still been able to deliver the services if it was approved on Monday?
Mr. Chairman, members, we will assume that to be a rhetorical or otherwise type question.
No, Mr. Chairman.
I called a meeting of Finance Committee today, and therefore if the member wants to question whether or not I should have called it today, that's another point, but I called it today at 10 a.m. and I stand by the decision to call it today at 10 a.m. And certainly I did not have any ticking time bomb given to me. The bottom line is I decided that today was the best day to call Finance Committee, and we called Finance Committee, and 18 of 19 of us are here.
Mr. Chairman, no one's disputing that. You have the authority under this committee to do so. I'm just asking the Honorable Minister, who's in charge, would he have been able to pay the necessary funds to the individuals if this approval was done on Monday? Because the standing orders does say we can propose a different date, which you did not support, which is fine. But I just want to be able to say whether or not we would have approved it on Monday, whether we could accomplish the same thing.
Well, the short answer and long answer really is no. We would not be there because of the process that has to start immediately to ensure that the people who are on long-term financial assistance are going to be paid at the end of the month.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, today is the 6th of June. The payments go out a little bit later on. So Monday would be the 9th or the 8th? The 8th. So 3 days later, you wouldn't have been able to pay anybody?
My team has advised that we would not have been able to pay anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, as having some experience, could I elucidate?
Honorable Premier.
I think what we could all agree, which is your point, that if 18 or 19 of us are here, and we can do something sooner rather than later to ensure that payments are done smoothly, let's get it done in the interest of our people while we're working and can do it. Could it be squeezed by Monday? Maybe, but we're here now, and no one knows what will happen between now and Monday that could blow something off. So while we're here, let's get things done as expeditiously as we can.
Since there are no further questions on supplementary being sought for TP 41, and I'll ask, are there any questions for HEA 2?
Mr. Chairman, you don't you have to take a vote on that first and move on?
I was going to vote on everything together, but there's a question been put that the supplementary appropriation for TP 41 form part of the schedule. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those against? No. The ayes have it. Supplementary appropriation for TP 41 stands part of the schedule. Any questions for HEA 2? Medical care for indigents. And as members have seen, we have...
Mr. Chair, before you move on, I'd like to thank the ministry team for assisting us this morning, sir.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder, Minister. Certainly I want to thank all members of the ministry team and department that oversees social development. Thank you for attending this meeting of Finance Committee and help assisting the minister to provide answers.
Thank you, sir. And yes, the departments.
HEA 2, medical care for indigents. Any questions? Oh, recognize the member from Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Mr. Chairman, and this is just my own understanding. First, I noticed in 2020, the HSA had a net income under my good friend here, the former minister back then from Bordentown East, of 1.2 million. In 2021, the net income or profit for the year was 8 million. And then I noticed in 2022 and 2023, the HSA had a net loss of 5.2 million for 2022 and a net loss of 7 million for 2023. So I just want to thank my good friend from Bordentown East, who then Minister for the profit of the HSA. Now, I saw the recent media reports concerning the iron freeze or whatever was out there, and I'm not going to get into that line of question because I think that the voters of Prospect and Bordentown West have already answered the political performance from that standpoint. But what I'm curious about, Mr. Chairman, apologies, is going through the annual report for the HSA since 2016 to 2023 that was on their website. I couldn't help but notice the changes in board remuneration. And for the members, to put things in context for the members and listening public, in 2023, the total board compensation, again, this is per the annual report, was $18,813. For 2017, it was an 18-month period, the total board remuneration was $23,700. In 2018, total board remuneration was $23,650. In 2019, it was $42,925. In 2020, it was $82,215. And then in 2021, it was $192,550. So it went from $82,215 in 2020 to $192,550 in 2021. And in 2022, it went to $250,900. And in 2023, $250,750. So in short, Mr. Speaker, between 2016 and 2023, board compensation went from $18,813 per year to $250,750, an increase of $231,937. Now, to put that in context and for comparison purposes, SEMA board total remuneration for 2022 was $130,000, again per SEMA's annual report, and for 2023 is $153,000. So just to compare the two numbers side by side, SEMA's total board remuneration for 2022, $130,000. HSA's board remuneration for 2022, almost $251,000. And in 2023, SEMA's total board remuneration was $153,000, and the HSA's total board remuneration is almost $251,000. Now, I say that to say, Mr. Chairman, is that before I get into the line of questioning with regards to the management of HA2, it's important that we understand what the culture of the board is at this level, because the board ultimately drives the performance of the HSA. And you can't be asking the HSA or whoever it is, if that what I read in the media is correct, to be having an iron freeze when some board members, I understand it, is going home with $8,000, $9,000 per month. And some staff members aren't even making anything as close as that. So before I start with my line of questioning, I'm trying to get a better understanding of why there is this massive increase in directors' fees payable at the HSA.
Honorable Minister.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can say to the honorable member that board compensations, as you know, are typically agreed upon by cabinets, and some board remunerations have been reviewed whilst others haven't. So I would imagine that that's the reason why the compensation has increased for HSA as it relates to the compensation of the members.
Minister can give a little bit of insight. I do not ask questions to which I don't have an idea what the answer is. I'm going to give you something else to consider. Based on your response then, may I ask then, since the board members, I understand that the HSA is paid on a per meeting basis, can I then ask for this committee to be provided with a list of the frequency of meetings? So I know you won't have that information today, but can you provide for me and the members here the list of meetings that have been called by the HSA since at least 2020 in terms of frequency? And basically, because I understand some members are attending like 4 meetings a week, and when you're being paid $500 per meeting for regular members, I think $750 for deputy chair, and I think maybe $900 for chairperson, and then you're having 3, 4, 5 meetings a week or several meetings, this number will go up. And I suspect that there is some level of abuse that is now going on as a result of this per meeting basis. So some of them 2 meetings, I've just been told sometimes 2 meetings in one day at $500 a pop for a regular meeting. That is ridiculous. So at this point, I'm going to ask them to provide to this committee and the members here the list and the frequency of all the meetings that have been happened by each of these directors, because this is supposed to be a public service. And I can tell you, as a former director of the HSA, when we're being paid, I think $150 or something way back when, for this now, this is unconscionable. So can you at least provide a list of the meetings, the frequency of the meeting that generate this level of compensation to board members, which is almost $100,000 in excess of what SEMA is basically doing?
Minister, can you give the undertaking?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was just about to do. I will give an undertaking to this Honorable House to provide that information in due course.
Honorable members, having just heard the line of questioning, what I can also give an undertaking to the honorable member to do is that as a government, we will look at how compensation is structured across all boards, because certainly, as you have alluded to, when you go per meeting, there can be an incentive to have more meetings versus just capping it and saying, here's what you will get per month to be a director of an agency. And I also know that the honorable member from Bordentown West would agree with me that whilst part of this is public service, we also understand that there needed to be some professionalization of some boards and ensuring that persons who bring certain skill sets sometimes were disincentivized from being on boards. And we know this from our past. And so, but there is a balance to be struck, I think is what the member is alluding to. And so we will take a look at board members and board compensations and ensure that for the boards that carry a heavier load like SEMA and the HSA, that we structure it properly and in a way that perhaps will not have this line of questioning in the future. Recognize the member from Bordentown East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I want to ask, or investigating really and trying to get some information as to the rates that are billed to the government for each year too. This has been a pet peeve of mine for a while in terms of the rates that the HSA bills to the government for the services. Am I correct in saying that if an item is $10 billed to everyone else outside of the government, that the government is also billed $10? Or do we get some kind of relational preferred rates?
Honorable Minister.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just ask the member to give me a moment to consult with my team. Mr. Chair, through you, to answer the members' questions, the rates are the same. It's the standard health insurance rates that are being charged.
Honorable member.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to know if the government would be willing, and I guess you could answer this, Mr. Chair, as Minister of Finance, to have that discussion with the HSA as to how, and the rates and the scales that are being charged back to the government, who also holds liability for the HSA.
Can I make sure I understand the question, Mr. Honorable Member? I thought the minister has indicated that the rates are the SHIC plan rates. SHIC. The SHIC plan rates.
Mr. Chair,
This is what happens when you go down this line of questioning.
yeah, I know.
Things go to SHIC.
I mean, as I guess a government entity, I wanted to know if there was a possibility that we could negotiate some kind of preferred relational rates. Would the government be amenable to having this discussion?
Well, just on that basis alone, we take money from one hand and put it into the next hand. Member, you will appreciate that asking the HSA to give CIG a preferred rate will then contribute to a deficit at the HSA because they're not going to employ any less doctors, the electricity bill is going to remain the same, et cetera, et cetera. And so we then have to fund them in some way, shape, or form. And through cost accounting, we really need to know what the HSA is making and make it comparable across the board. And I would certainly not support any preferential rate along those lines, because then other persons may come and start asking for a preferential rate, and then the deficit for HSA would grow even bigger. So any other questions?
Yes, thank you. I think that's fair, Mr. Chair. One of the other things I wanted to ask, I guess it's just not only for the HSA, but it's been a question I've asked for some time now, but it does affect the HSA who does have this 90-day facility. I think the HSA's 90-day facility is $27 million. It has been a question I've brought up many times in terms of us reducing this to 60 or 30. It's just a question to free up some cash. So I understand these monies are placed in account and they gain interest, and the interest is used for whatever purposes. But would this government have any appetite to investigate reducing the 90-day facility for those government departments that have to do so? And yeah. I know the FS knows that this is a question I've brought up for some time now, but I see it also as holding double liability, because we still hold the liability for these departments.
But as I understand it, member, the issue still revolves around big picture, how the FFR is framed, and that is that these rules that apply to central government also has to apply to the entire public sector, entire government. So I think that's a wider question, and I think at this stage we're certainly not going to engage in a renegotiation of the entire FFR.
Mr. Chairman.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, as I catch my breath.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask the Honourable Minister whether this amount will be sufficient enough to get them through the rest of the year?
Mr. Chairman, member, in my opening remarks and in the schedule, we have made it clear that it will not, and we're giving this amount as 50%, hoping that they would manage this tightly as possible, and then we would call a future finance committee, say sometime in September, to deal with the rest. And as we know, there's potentially going to be the same thing for veterans and seamen, not to predict negative outcomes, but all of us who have been around the budget knows that there are certain areas that we're going to fall short in regards to these types of arrangements that we have that are necessary. And so we would call another committee because we want to ensure that we're working for the people.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try to say this as politely as I possibly can. I do thank you for your input in respect to the line of question, and every time it's very necessary. But when questions are put to the minister, outside of the answer itself, it also gives the level of competence and knowledge, know-how of the relevant ministers in respect to their subject matter. So, not telling you what to do, Mr. Chairman, but the listening audience in this Honorable House has to see that the respective ministers are adequately informed and prepared to respond to the questions. Though I see that you are super informed on all these areas, which is what is appropriate for the Minister of Finance, but I just hope that the minister can actually answer the question, sir.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm very capable of answering the question, and I was going to redirect the Deputy Leader of the Opposition back to the comments that you made when you opened by simply saying that we are already anticipating we will have to come back, but we are here today to just take about 50% of what we are anticipating will be needed. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want my good friend and the Honourable Minister to know I wasn't indicating that for her. I was setting the stage for the rest in the future, because the ministers need to answer the questions. They're the one responsible for the line items. My last follow-up question, though, Mr. Chairman, and it's just for a matter of record, because you're going to see that we're going to set a stage here shortly. That again, can we say who the Honourable Minister was at the time of this budget approval?
Before the member answers, let me make sure that the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition understands some very basic parliamentary procedure. In my opening comments, I said at this time, only 20.57 million is being requested as supplementary funding, but the government intends to return later in the year for the balance of the funding. I then went on to say, that was an NGS 55. I then went on to say, at this time, in relation to this item, at this time, 8.25 million is being requested as supplementary funding, but the government intends to return later this year for the balance of the funding. So remember, if we're going to play by the rules that you just said, please note in the future that any question asked in this committee going forward that I have spoken to in my commentary, I will not allow as a question, because I've already answered it. Proceed, member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought we had passed that already, because I accepted the member's answer and as well as yours. I was actually moving on now to ask about the 12 million for 2024 and 12 million for 2025. What I'm trying to ask, Mr. Chairman, through you to the minister, can the ministry say whether or not that was the proposed adequate amount for the year or not?
Minister, could you answer the question?
Mr. Chair, through you, I think this has been raised earlier. It is evident that this is a trend. We see where, if I look here, for the past few years, the actual original budgeted amount versus the actual expenditure is significantly different. And that is not a today issue. That has been ongoing for a number of years. And what I'd like to see through you, Mr. Chair, is that certainly takes a change with this new administration. We need to set realistic and honest answers to the people as it relates to what it takes to fund HEA2 and NGS 55. And fortunately for me, I sit with a cabinet that understands and appreciates the fact that this is a priority versus any huge capital projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Honorable Member for Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to understand something, and again, this goes back to the culture at the HSA, and specifically because this is something I think we need to get a bottom of, and I'm setting the stage as you guys prepare your budget and your strategic policy statement in terms of where my headspace is in this regard. I noticed, again, as I said earlier, my good friend from Bordentown East, when he was minister, the HSA had a profit of $8 million for 2021, and that was generated from $169 million in revenues and $161 million in expenses. I noticed in 2023 that the HSA had $177 million in revenues and roughly $184 million in costs, and at a net loss of $7 million. So in essence, they moved from $8 million profit to $7 million loss in the space of 2 years, which is a $15 million swing. But when I look at their the revenues, it went from $169 million in 2021 to roughly $77 million in 2023. So they basically had an $8 million increase in revenues in those 2 year period. However, in their operating expenses, it went from $161 million in 2021 to roughly $184 million in 2023, which is a $23 million swing. So in short, in that 2 year period, revenues went up by $8 million and expenses went up by $23 million. I also noticed that the staff costs alone went from roughly $94 million to roughly just over $118 million. So a significant increase. And what I'm trying to understand now is in terms of the growth in the staff costs, which ultimately is driving up the loss position of the HSA. I'm trying to understand what are the new services that is actually driving those increases in staff costs. Because when you have revenues going up by $8 million and expenses going up by $23 million, that is a recipe, that is a trend that cannot continue. So, I mean, over 10 years, if you continue like that, over 10 years, that's $150 million problem. So we went from a good performance under this previous, when my good friend from Bordentown East was minister, to where we are now. And I'm just trying to get a better understanding of what is driving the increase in staff costs, what services are being added.
Mr. Chair, just ask for a few minutes to liaise with my team.
Certainly. But just to say very quickly, members, that the two periods under comparison were within the last term, political term.
Well, the 21 we kind of inherited because the last government actually went out in 2021. So the trend and the momentum already started for 21. So it would be unpolitical to take credit for something that someone did, especially considering that the previous year he also had a profit again too.
Understood, member.
Mr. Chair, through you.
Honorable Minister.
So to answer the member's question, I've been informed that majority of the increase has to do with the fact that we have a significantly larger population, and some of the services that have been increased, we now have additional neonatal services, internist, orthopedic surgeons, also neurologists and neurosurgeon as well. And then in the BRAC, there's also been additional pediatrician. And the reason for staffing up is to reduce the number of referrals out, because certainly with the increase in population, it is becoming difficult to keep up with the demand.
Honorable member.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I am looking, and I'm just going to say this much, on page 48 of the Cayman Islands Health Services 2023 annual report that breaks down where the different staff sit. So what I would say when budget time come around is for the members on the government side to pretty much look at those services in terms of where the staff sits, so we can, have an idea in terms of where the actual growth is. Because I noticed, for example, like neurosurgeon, chiropractic services, and so forth, are some of the stuff that are actually being added on. And the reason I'm asking these questions, Mr. Chairman, is that we now have several medical facilities on island. We have Doctors Hospital, we have Health City, that has also been expanding. And some of these services, even though the population is growing, those other hospitals are also growing these services. And I think it's high time that we sit down and have a comprehensive discussion with all the other hospitals, look at the services that are being offered on island, and see if we're not duplicating some of the services, because we're still a small population, it's still limited. And while I accept that the HSA will always be the primary caregiver of Caymanians, at the same time, if some private sector organizations are providing the service at a reasonable cost, I don't think this is something that we need to be expanding into. And so, like I said, I've gone through the annual reports, I've looked at the growths, I've looked at the year-on-year movements and some of these stuff, and I can tell you it is now concerning, especially when you consider now that talking about, as of 2023, lost basically 1,198 total staff at the HSA. And when you look at it, then you look at the building space, you look at, sometimes you wonder where these people are going. And if you look between 2020 and 2023, the staff cost increase alone, where are these people going? Now, luckily, also included in the annual report is the list of just about every single place that is being rented to. You know what I mean? So, again, we have a list of all of that. So I need to ask the question on the leases is actually included in the financial statement. But at some point, we need to have this conversation, because as I said before, an $8 million increase in revenues and a $23 million increase in costs in a 2-year period is unsustainable for this country. We can't maintain this.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member for his question as well as his observations. I will say that we are still in early days, and we are looking at the services that are provided by HSA, and the government will be taking their position, which members will become aware of in short order.
May I, through you, Mr. Chairman, may I just ask for one more consideration while that exercise is being undertaken, is also to take a look at the ambulance services that is being provided. I have some seniors in my area that are bedridden, and even sometimes to go to a doctor's appointment, they actually do need some kind of ambulatory service to sometimes to get to those appointments. And I understand that there are some challenges in that regard. So I was going to ask them to also look at the overall ambulance services and also the structure of it. Because now I understand, there was an incident recently where trying to move one patient from El City in Camana Bay to El City in East End was an issue. You know what I mean? So we need to start looking at even the overall structure of the ambulance service. Is this something that should be moved on to the fire service as an emergency first responder system, or is it something that remains at HSA? So as we're growing and we're looking at these strategic initiatives, we need to also factor in the growth of the country, the movement in demographic, and the fact now that we have other facilities. Because the last thing you want now is having more ambulance piling up on the road, running through traffic, especially from the Eastern District and town from that standpoint too. So those are the kind of things I'll ask to also be looked at as you're undertaking this exercise.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Just to say to the member, the holistic review includes and not limited to the review of the ambulatory services as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, the members from DFA and the chief officers have left, but I have a question that relates to HSA that connects to DFA and actually Cynical. And if I'm correct in my understanding, Mr. Chairman, you are responsible for Cynical?
Yes.
Okay. Just only for the context of the conversation, there's been an ongoing problem, and the Minister for DFA would probably be debriefed on this, where the challenge of an indigent person getting healthcare benefits goes through 3 different ministries in order for it to be approved. And the now Premier would be aware of this. Goes to DFA for approval to, after being assessed of you have not having the monies available to pay for it. Then it has to go to HSA for a doctor to determine that you need some medical services, and then go to Cynical for Cynical to actually approve it. And then there's been so much discrepancies, particularly with indigents, whether a person is deemed indigent or not, and the different levels of workability. So the discrepancies with one doctor to another doctor could be changed in one day. And I know that the head of HSA, Ms. Yearwood, has been working really, really hard. I must put on record that she's an amazing leader, so I'm really proud that she's doing what she's doing there. But this process for health care for indigent persons just takes so long because it goes from one to the other. And the new Minister for Health, the new Chief Officer for Health may be fully aware of what happened in DFA and can maybe see whether or not there's going to be some improvements to that process, because sometimes our people need help quickly, but the process takes so long because it has to go across 3 different entities and 3 different ministries. So I don't know if the Minister can opine on that.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just to say to the member that that is a process that we are looking at right now through the ministry, and we will endeavor to try to make the process a lot easier, remove some of the, I guess it could be seen to a lot of the applicants as the bureaucracy, but ensuring that we are complying with legislation. So there might be a need to make some legislative changes, and we are currently looking at that at the ministry.
Are there any other further questions? Are there any other further questions? If not, I will take a vote on the supplementary appropriation being sought by the Minister for Health, Environment and Sustainability as it relates to HEA2 medical care for indigents. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. The ayes have it. The item has been added to the schedule. I now open questions as it relates to appropriation changes by the Minister responsible for Health, Environment and Sustainability for supplier output, Cayman Islands and overseas hospitals, appropriation reference NGS 55, tertiary medical care for various local and overseas institutions. This item is now open for questioning. Does any member have any questions? Honourable Member for Bordentown East.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And obviously, this is a very important vote and support that our people need. And I'm happy that the government or this country is able to provide this to some of our most vulnerable. As the Minister said earlier, Mr. Chair, that she's reviewing some of these policies. And I'm wondering, because we can't continue on this track. This is going to break this country. And I know we had been looking at some systems in the past, try to take care of this NGS 55. Is the Minister undertaking any reviews and trying to figure out how to manage this appropriation a little better than we have been in the past.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, firstly, just to, I guess, educate the public, those who are listening, as all of us members know NGS 55, but for those that are listening, NGS 55 is to provide care to their indigents, seafarers, and veterans with tertiary medical care. So we know that certainly for our seafarers and our veterans, there's not really a whole lot that we can do about that appropriation because they have built this country, and it is the government's responsibility to make sure that they have the best health care available. What I can say is that as it relates to the other individuals that fall in the indigent category, that there is a comprehensive review of the entire health care of those individuals. And one of the things that we are going to try to approach from the wellness side is trying to ensure that we are focusing more on preventative care so that we don't find our citizens falling into the case of being, even if you are indigent, may not necessarily be medically indigent, which is pushing up a lot of the costs as it relates to this TP.
Mr. Chair,
Member from Bordentown East.
I really thank the Minister for a comprehensive answer, and I look forward to some of the work that her team will do. And I'm glad to hear, very happy to hear the Minister mention wellness, which is key. And I think when we talk about wellness, if the Minister can also investigate taking wellness to the people, rather than just having wellness in Georgetown, but have wellness in every district, even under the trees, wherever people gather, you know, go to them. And definitely, some people are actually challenged to the fact that they don't have insurance, health insurance. So they're scared to go to the hospitals, and they'd rather suffer than to be embarrassed. They don't even know the procedures or that it's okay to go. But what I want to say is that if the Minister can also look at a white paper that was done some years ago by the ministry, I think the chief officer should have that information, in terms of us having some kind of cabotage rate, and some of what my colleague from Bordentown West mentioned earlier, to see if we can work with other organizations. I remember, you know, Baptists and others, Cleveland, everyone came down, met with me, trying to offer a bit of services in a cabotage rate. I'm sure that we can somehow negotiate special rates, whether that's Health City, whether that's Doctors Hospital, for a bit of that business. What was in the white paper, Mr. Chair, is that they would take on a bit of the business for 5 years at a time and freeze the rate that was currently being paid out, whether that was $50 million at the time, freeze it for 5 years, and the savings at the time was going to be about $50 million over the 5-year period, and they would charge the same rate for 5 years. But right now, what we're seeing with this NGS 55 is, I think it is increasing by 10 to 15% or more per annum. That would have been freezed. So just trying to think outside the box, I was trying to do at the time. I thought we were getting somewhere with it, but our term ended or COVID came or something. But I think it is worth, some of the medical facilities were ready to grab on to this. and they're even ready to insure people, all of the people on this indigent list. And if anything could not be handled here in Cayman by these medical facilities, they would actually be also responsible for sending the people overseas, even within this amount of funds, whether that was 50 million, just using the number. But everything was going to be covered by them. The government was going to have no more responsibility in terms of flying them out to Baptist, flying them to Cleveland or otherwise. All this was going to be in it. Even NICUs, some people might not know what NICUs are, but you know, the babies, was going to be included in this. And I think, Mr. Chair, we cannot continue down this route. And, you know, I guess one of the answers to it also is the wellness factor. But we cannot continue down this route with the way that the NGS 55 is growing. And I have been also a minister, so I know the fight that the minister is going to have in terms of trying to balance a budget for the whole caucus and not realizing the whole $50 million in your budget and, you know, just playing a good team member and agreeing to let the business of the country go on. And at some point, and as the Premier said, what we always say, once you take it down for NGS 55 or HEA 2, nobody's gonna vote against it. They're gonna give you your funds. So that's the comfort I got. And so, Mr. Chair, Minister, I don't know how willing you are to, and I'm sure you are, I know you, to think outside the box and try to find a different way to try to manage these funds.
Minister?
Mr. Chair, through you, thank you, member, for all that you have added. I want to just say quickly that I failed to mention, as it relates to trying to bring down the costs, one of the things that we are going to look at is entering or levering purchasing agreements for high-cost drugs to be able to access these drugs at a lower or discounted price. That is something that's certainly driving up the cost. And then taking wellness to the people. I certainly plan to do that. And guess where I'm going to start? Right here. I'm going to start by hoping that we will all lead by example. And I'm going to be mentioning the plans very soon, but I really hope that we as a country and as leaders of the country can really take wellness to another level. And then, as you mentioned, your white paper, I haven't seen it, but I give a commitment to reading it and hopefully taking on some of the suggestions. It really sounds like something that we need to be looking at right now. As I mentioned earlier, we are seeing now that we have a lot more people in the country, so we there really hasn't been a whole lot of talk about capacity, but I'm sure if we don't find some interim measures, I'll be back here, and that will be something. So I'm praying that we don't get to that stage, and I thank the member for his information.
So the member have any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm that this NGS 55 has also taken the same line of lack of proper budgeting as the other two previous line items. Can the minister confirm?
Yes, sir. That is confirmed. Again, a trend that we've seen with this line item is that it is significantly always under budgeted, and then there are frequent Section 12 requests that come throughout the budget year.
The member for Georgetown East.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the minister, can you tell us how long this 20 million is expected to last?
Minister?
Thank you, Honourable Member. We are hoping that it will take us down to about August, as the Chair mentioned earlier.
And just so members are aware, we're to September.
Sorry, September.
And so the idea is that we would be returning in September to do another finance committee. So, but I will ensure that we give more than 22 hours notice.
Thank you too, Mr. Chair. Another question, just looking at the way the flows coming back in September, I mean, the preview that we had was projecting $60 million for this year for NGS 55. I think I heard you say something like 55 million this morning.
Yes, honorable member.
Okay, so anywhere between 55 and $60 million. That would appear to me that would be incurred within the, not all of it, but certainly about between 20 and $25 million being incurred in the last 3 to 4 months of the year, which seems, you know, the amount just seems to be quite large to be incurred in the last 3 to 4 months of the year. I'm just wondering how that all plays out for us, and whether really that the funding is going to be so significant, it's going to have a fairly significant effect on what is a potential deficit for the year.
So, member, just to be clear to honorable members, when I said about the rounds that the team in finance went through before preparing the preview, these numbers, these increased numbers that I've spoken to today are already accounted for in that $26.2 million projected deficit. Member for Borden Down West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you. Just expanding on what my colleague from Georgetown East just mentioned a while ago in terms of the preview for NGS 55 being 60 million, and then also considering that HEA2, I think you're looking at around 28 million, 28.5 million, I think, for the full year. So it basically would mean that the combined spend for NGS 55 and HEA2 for this year is going to be close to $100 million. And I say that in the context that in 2023, if memory serves me right, we spent $78 million in total for both NGS 55 and HEA2. And in a 2-year period, we're talking about going from roughly 78 million to basically almost 100 million. So that's an increase of 20 million in the space of 2 years. Additionally, as the minister had said, that this vote covers the cost of seafarers, veterans and indigent. I think members and the public can all agree that the number of seafarers that we have each year is actually decreasing, unfortunately, and the number of veterans that we have in each year is actually also decreasing. But it is the number of indigents that's actually increasing that is actually driving this cost. And I'm going to say right now, and this is not something just for the minister of this government, this is something for every one of us in this parliament to be concerned with, because this is no past politics now. We have an aging population. They're not getting any younger. And the scariest part about this, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to put this out, looking at the last numbers, again, I'm speaking from memory, from SEMA's annual report, the total profit in the healthcare industry for 2023 was the equivalent of 19 million CI dollars, of which 10 million belongs to Cineco, which means then that the other insurance companies are sharing that $9 million profit. And I'm going to say again, at what point are we going to see these foreign insurance companies pull out and leave an aging population with pre-existing conditions? We've seen it already when other insurance companies have left and people had to go out and get insurance elsewhere. So as we're looking at this issue, we need to start looking seriously at a national insurance solution, because the private sector will pull out and leave our people when they need it, when they can no longer make a profit. And the trend, if you look at it, is that they're making less and less money every year on an aging population. And we're going to be the ones stuck with turning off the lights when this issue happens. So, yeah. So from that standpoint, Mr. Chairman, as we're looking at this entire review. And to give credit where credit was due, the last time, if memory again serves me right, that a complete review was done was actually when you were a minister in cabinet with Mark Scotland. It was the last time a complete comprehensive one was done, and that was from 2005 to 2009, to put things in context. So this is something that's long overdue. And I will ask them to also even look at even having a capitated model or something that would actually help. But we need to look at this holistically. And we need to factor in that there's a very strong possibility that some of the very insurance that the private sector is carrying now, they may pull out a Cayman. And we have seen it already. And it just is, if you look at the numbers and where they're trending, it is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. So we need to be the ones, because ultimately it is our job to be looking out for Caymanian people. So this is something that is not this government didn't inherit it. This is something that every one of us here have to deal with. This is not a political issue. This is now a national priority for our people. So just take that in, and I'm going to tell you right now, recognizing the importance of this, and this is something I'm very passionate about. I think if anything, we should have a bipartisan approach or solution to this and not make this a political issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member from Bordentown West, the point is well taken. And in fact, I have with me the unaudited results from 23 for the two items combined, 78 million. Unaudited for 24, 82 million. In this round, at this stage, the estimate from the ministry is 29 for HEA2, 55 for NGS, which gives us 84 million. So the point is not lost on the government that as this sector continues to have persons move from the private sector to government, and this has been a conundrum that a lot of members have always grappled with, which you just pointed out, is that people say loosely, well, we're having less seamen. Whilst we're having less seamen, there's spouses of seamen, but on top of that, to bolster up your argument and your point, which is well taken, we know that health insurance companies keep people on until they retire, which is when they're less healthy, and guess what? They show up on government's doorstep, and that is driving the 78 to 80 to 84 million. So you're quite right. Those are the shrinking profits that are now showing up at a cost to government. So the government is committed to a review, and certainly I suspect that your offer of doing this in a manner that represents the whole House, because this is a national issue, as you've said, is going to be, I dare say, the right way to go for us as we were to look at how we actually approach what healthcare and health insurance, more importantly, looks like in Cayman.
Mr. Chair.
Member for Bordentown East.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I think you went into it, but I'm not sure if you mentioned if the Honorable Minister, I'm not sure which minister is responsible for the seafarers, but are we going to change the policy in terms about new wives? Sorry, I'm not trying to curtail anyone's marriage.
I will gladly ask the minister responsible to respond.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry. It is something that will be taken under consideration, sir.
Member from Red Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I was very pleased to hear about the review where we will be looking at leveraging buying power. Medicine is something that sadly the last couple of years I've come to appreciate how expensive some medicines can be. particularly those sort of cancer-related. And I know personally for a situation where one particular medicine was $23,000 across several hospitals here. $23,000 has to be paid every 3 weeks. And fortunately for the individual, there was one hospital that had it for $8,000. That's a tremendous amount. That's a tremendous difference. So I don't know what the reason for that difference was, but I suspect partly it might be because of their ability, I'm suspecting, to purchase in large quantities or something of that sort. So I encourage you to carry on with that, and hopefully we'll have some good luck getting those costs down.
Minister?
I thank the honorable member. I too personally understand these issues, and it is something that we will undertake to looking into.
Are there any further questions? Any further questions? Any further questions? No further questions. Can those in favor of the appropriation changes sought by the Minister for Health, Environment and Sustainability as it relates to NGS 55, tertiary medical care for various local and overseas institutions, adding an additional $20,537,000 to the appropriation? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. The item has been added to the schedule. This then, members, has brought us to the end of the process as it relates to
Mr.
Finance
Chairman?
Committee for today. Member for Bordentown West.
I know before you wrap up and have the final say, I just want to, at this point, just apologize for my absence in the next parliamentary session. Unfortunately, my wife father passed away 3 days ago, and the same time that Parliament is set for is the same time as the funeral, so I'll be off island and be missing the next session. So I just want to offer my apologies from now.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and on behalf of the government and the committee, I would offer condolences to your good wife and yourself and your good wife and her family.
Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Honourable Deputy Premier, a Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Chairman, it's just more of a matter for budget time. I know that we are trying to advance ourselves to be very paperless, but I want to get confirmation whether the budget documents and planning estimates will still be provided for members in the form that it's currently being given. As you can tell, many times you have to go through different documents back and forth, the appropriation bill, the planning estimates, the budgets and so forth, to understand where the focus of the monies are. And though I would like to be efficient with my technology, one screen would not allow me to be able to maneuver back and forth. So I just wanted clarity that these will still be printed, available for members in a new budget coming up.
Honourable Member, I know that there's a move by the Parliament to reduce paper and go paperless. But I dare say that with something of this significance, what I can say and commit to the committee, because at that point we'll be in committee, is for those who do prefer the paper, we will accommodate that because we'll be in committee at that stage. And we'll do a quick whip around and ensure that we understand who will want those in paper still. Member for Bordentown East.
Mr. Chair, I thank you so much for allowing me, as my button buying constituency, Bordentown West member, offer my condolences to his wife on the passing of her father. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister for Health.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Through you, I too would like to offer condolences to the elected member and his family. I would like to just ask if you could allow me to thank my team for coming down here and assisting me during this Finance Committee.
Absolutely. So I wish to thank all honorable ministers. Honorable Premier.
Mr. Chair, just some closing comments. I'd like to thank all members who were able to attend today on short notice, given the urgency of the matter of delivering essential services to our people, and thank them for their time and their consideration and good points and discussions. I think two overarching points emerge from the entire meeting of this committee. One is we would prefer not to, and strive as much as we can to break the trend of successive social development and health ministers being in a position to try to be team players to balance something that they've advocated for won't last, to have realistic budgets. But in order to have any shred of the budget actually lasting, the second overarching point is that we're going to need system changes. We're going to have to rationalize services, make sure that they're as efficient as possible, and also make sure that we're making prudent decisions, that there are assessments. If there are services that are extended to continuing spouses, which was not the intent of the policy, hard decisions are going to have to be made. And in addition to that, if services are frozen for assessments for political purposes or increases that can't be justified, we're going to have to make harder decisions to make these budget items realistic and long-lasting to serve the overall best interest of the country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I wish to thank all honorable ministers, parliamentary secretaries, members of the opposition bench, chief officers, and all of the civil servants that provided answers to questions raised to honorable members of the opposition today. Approval of these items by Finance Committee will now enable it to form part of the supplementary appropriation bill for the 2025 financial year. Honorable members, you will also know too that although Finance Committee has approved these items today, these same items will be seen again later by the committee because the government has to include these items in a supplementary appropriation bill for the 2025 financial year, which committee members will see. Such a wrap-up supplementary appropriation bill is due to be presented to the Parliament no later than 3 months after the 2025 financial year, in other words, by the 31st of March 2026. Proceedings in Finance Committee are now concluded, and approvals granted by Finance Committee will enable budgets to be increased so as to allow additional expenditures to be included in the areas of expenditure that the committee has discussed, questioned, and approved. I thank you all, honorable members.